Good morning, friends.
Good morning.
Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Santa Cruz County. My name is Andy Kreyche. I use he, him pronouns and am serving as your worship leader. Steve Sandis and I are sharing worship associate duties today. Our congregation is served twice monthly by our part-time minister, Reverend Laura Horton-Ludwig, and often features guest ministers. Other Sundays, like today, we hearken back to our fellowship roots with lay-led worship. Unitarian Universalism, UU for short, is a liberal religious tradition based not on a checklist of beliefs, but on shared values. Within our tent, you'll find a wide array of individuals. Each of us find insight from a wide array of inspirational sources. One source in the legacy of our UU tradition is wisdom from world religions. We value any insight that supports our shared values and inspires our own ethical and spiritual journeys. A year ago, I was up here welcoming visitors from the Sikh faith to share insights about their practice. Today, we will learn about Quakers from two people who know and have lived that tradition. Our worship theme for this month is practicing resistance, something Quakers are known for. Quaker resistance includes a long history of nonviolent activism and peaceful protest against war, slavery, and various forms of oppression. I'm curious, how many UUs here have ever attended a Quaker meeting? I can raise my hand, so that's pretty good. Well, 3 weeks ago, I attended my first Quaker meeting at Santa Cruz, and I took part in the shared spiritual experience of sitting in silence together. It was unusual for me, but I came out energized in a way I didn't anticipate. While preparing for today, I've come to see our Quaker friends and we UUs as fellow travelers. We're both heading the same direction, but along parallel streets, or perhaps we're walking along opposite banks of the same river. I'd like to think that visiting them and inviting our two speakers here today is a little like building a bridge across that river so we can explore, compare notes, and be inspired by what it's like on the other side.
Hi, good morning.
Hi. Good morning.
An important concept to Quakers is the inner light present within each soul. A ritual in Unitarian Universalism is to light a single flame in a chalice. This brings us together in community, the symbol of hope and connection. Andy will now light the chalice. Today's chalice lighting words were chosen with our visiting friends in mind. They were written by Carolyn Treadway and are from one in a series of Quaker brochures called Simplicity as a Spiritual Exercise. Our society seems to require us to live in fast forward. Everything seems accelerated. Rainwater, which in the old days sank into the soil, now rushes across paved over lands. Similarly, we are deluged with incessant information which does not sink into us to become knowledge and eventual wisdom. Slowing down frees time and space for spiritual connection and reverence for life. We must act on what our deep hearts already know. All life is sacred. Everything is connected. From this space, we can create a world we are proud to leave to our children and all future generations. Reverence for life empowers us to take responsibility for and to care for ourselves, each other, and contribute to the renewal of our planet.
So, my name is Margo McBain,
And I just want to apologize because we wish we could stay for hospitality, but I've been fighting a sinus infection, and so we're heading out after the service, but it's not that we don't want to spend time with you. Just wanted to explain why we're ducking out. Anyway, Noreen and I came to Quakerism in very different ways. She converted, and I am a birthright, meaning that I was born into a Quaker family whose roots extend to the founding of Quakerism. Quakers are known, it's really the religious society of Friends called Quakers because of the shaking that took place during their worships. When I was younger, birthright Quakers were automatically members of the meetings, but this is no longer true. So I decided to highlight the history of Quakerism, also inserting some of my family's background. So the Society of Friends began in the 1650s, challenging King Henry VIII's Protestant Church of England that was formed in 1534. George Fox, the founder of Quakerism, along with other preachers, based this movement on inward experiences, creating a direct communication with God. The Quakers were considered upstarts and resistors because they were resisting the English social structure by acknowledging that men and women were spiritual equals, that they all could speak publicly in meeting, although the meetings were divided by gender, half women on one side, men on the other. The other challenge of Quakers was to the Church of England itself, that they were stating that individuals could directly communicate with God without a reliance on any ministers or priests. They also were church disruptors, which a lot of people don't think Quakers are also quiet, but they actually, at this time, would go into church services and disrupt them. Quakers were faced with religious and economic repression because of their these kind of disruptive behavior in England in the 1660s. They were excluded from certain professions and government jobs. So a lot of the Quakers entered into commerce and industry, working in banking, shoe industry, iron industry, and chocolates, the Cadbury families. I'm sure you've heard of Cadbury chocolates. Because of the repression, they began to take more of an inward look into the religion itself, setting up monthly meetings, quarterly meetings, and yearly meetings. They also immigrated to American colonies beginning in the 1650s, settling primarily in Maryland and then Rhode Island, compared to who were more liberal in their attitudes towards religion compared to Puritan Massachusetts, that harshly treated the Quakers either through banishment or death. In the 1680s, Quakers comprised 1% of the American colonial population. William Penn, who was a convinced or converted Quaker, established Pennsylvania in 1681 as a holy experiment between all different faiths of people living peaceably together. During the 1700s, the second and third generation Quakers began a series of different movements. One was called Quietism, where they really suppressed issues of music, reading, and theater because they thought that would interrupt your direct communication with God. You're always waiting for the call and the word of the inner light or God. There also was the Reformation, which was Quakers questioning the rise of wealthier Quakers who were becoming more worldly, and the Reform movement stressed plain dress, plain speech, meaning speaking thee and thy, instead of you and your, and plain living, was really forcing to live separate from the corrupt world, and marriage only within Quakers, or you were expelled from the meeting. The major influences in the 1700s of Quakers was through fair treatment of Native Americans and abolition of slavery, although many early Quakers prior to 1750s did own slaves. But abolished that practice after the 1750s. Education is important to Quakers. William Penn and George Fox both believed in specific approaches to education. Fox established the first Quaker school in 1668, emphasizing practical skills and ethical principles over the classics. In America, Quakers first established primary schools and then secondary or colleges in the 1800s. And these schools were based on worship, Quaker worship, equality, learning in community for the common good, and hands-on learning. Noreen and I are both examples of believing in Quaker education because we both were trained in those. I went to Quaker college, as did she, and most of my relatives have gone either to Quaker high schools, colleges, or taught at them. The first Quaker school, when it was developed by is called the William Penn Charter School in Philadelphia in 1689, and it stressed accessibility and equality, offering scholarships for poor students and accepting both boys and girls, which was rare because most schools at that time were only for boys. Haverford College was the first Quaker college developed in Pennsylvania in 1833. As Pennsylvania became more crowded in the 1800s, Quakers migrated north to New England and New York, and then south, primarily to North Carolina. My own family converted to Quakerism after meeting George Fox and immigrated to Pennsylvania, and then migrated to Greensboro, North Carolina, where there was a large Quaker settlement. The Quakers in Greensboro established a second Quaker college called Guilford in 1837. Quakers were abolitionists in North Carolina, and as a result of this, they established the Underground Railroad, which began at Guilford College. They also were pushed out of North Carolina because of their abolitionist viewpoints and migrated first to Ohio and then to Indiana in the 1820s. They temporarily closed Guilford College when they left, and they opened Earlham College, the third Quaker college, in 1847, and I'm a fifth generation Earlham.
Wow.
So the 1800s was the period of the Great Separation of American Quakers. They divided into 4 different sects, and I'm not going to go into all of that, but in the 1900s, they consolidated into only 2 groups. One is the unprogrammed meetings, which we have here in Santa Cruz, which stretches reflection towards the inner light and continuous revelation through the scriptural writings. Program meetings, called Friends Churches, are more evangelical in nature, and they are structured more like a Methodist or Baptist church with a paid minister, services, singing hymns, ministry, and only a few minutes of silence compared to the unprogrammed meetings that are full hours of silence. The rise of Quaker witnessing began with the American Friends Service Committee. One of the leaders of the consolidation from 4 sects to 2 sects was Rufus Jones. He taught at Haverford College and then set up the Earlham School of Religion, and he created these 2 sects, or was pivotal in that movement. He also was one of the founders of the American Friends Service Committee that started in 1917 as a support for Quaker conscientious objectors in World War I. And then in the 20s, they expanded from the U.S., and my husband and I, David Foster, worked for the AFSC in summer times, helping high school-aged kids build farm labor cooperative housing project in Salinas in the 70s. Noreen also worked on an AFSC project during that time period. Abroad, the AFSC expanded, and in 1947, the AFSC and the British Friends Service Committee received the Nobel Peace Prize for their humanitarian work to rebuild Europe after World War II. David's parents and my mother-in-law and father-in-law were Herb and Ellie Foster. I don't know if any of you know them. They passed. But they both converted to Quakerism after attending the Baptist Redlands College in Southern California, and after the war went to Austria and worked with refugees through the AFSC, helping with housing and feeding refugees. To show you what a small world Quakers are, their supervisor in Austria was a man named David Kreyche, who they named David Foster, their son, after. He's my cousin. And we didn't know that until we met other cousins much later. When they returned to the United States, Herb and Ellie were the founders of the Santa Cruz Friends meeting in the 1950s.
Today's reading is from A Quaker Book of Wisdom by Robert Lawrence Smith. For a time, Smith was the head of Sidwell Friends School in Washington, D.C. That school is known for educating the children of politicians, including the daughters of Presidents Nixon, Clinton, and Obama. During his tenure there from the mid-1960s through the 70s, Smith promoted racial and gender equality at the school and emphasized the principles of nonviolence, civic engagement, and community service. Here's how he described his denomination in a nutshell. Quakerism is the only faith that is most commonly explained in a cascade of negatives. Quakerism has no theology, no body of religious dogma, no sacred books, no written creed. Traditional Quaker worship does not involve a minister, priest, or other religious leader. There is no liturgy. There are no crucifixes or other religious images in Quaker meeting houses or homes. Quakers do not accept the idea of original sin, nor do they believe in a personal God who rewards and punishes. Friends do not baptize, and their wedding service is a simple exchange of vows between bride and groom within a meeting for worship. Despite their Christian roots, the relationship between the sufferings of Christ on the cross and what Quakers call the light within has always been pretty murky. Forget eternal damnation, forget salvation, and also hell, heaven, and purgatory. Look for truth within yourself and within your meeting for worship. Live a life of simplicity, love, and service. Let your life speak, and trust that your children will learn by your example.
I'm going to begin by telling you that I grew up Catholic, and when I was about 17 in my religion class at a Catholic school, I asked some questions, and the teacher I had, the nun, called me a hypocrite, which I was really a good girl, and I didn't understand why. And I thought, someday I'll find a religion that matches me a little bit better. And I did. And this is how I found it. It was Quakerism. When I was in college, I took a class in the politics of nonviolence. And a woman, Quaker, came to speak to the class. And primarily, she talked about Quaker activism and belief. And I just thought that was for me. And she invited students to come to visit. So I went. And I'm still here. That was like, I don't know how many years ago. More than 50. So I saw things that were different. I saw the absence of the creed and more responsibility on the individual. And I saw equality in men and women, equality in ages. I noticed how my friends, I met some young people who were Quakers, and how they and their parents interacted with each other in a very respectful way. And I really was involved in peace and justice at the time because the Vietnam War was going on. And I liked the sense of community that I experienced. So you heard a lot about the basic beliefs. There's something called the testimonies, and it's how we live our faith. And we review those from time to time. And one is simplicity, one is peace, one is integrity, community, equality, and stewardship. And all of our activism is spirit-led, as you can probably tell from the things that have already been said. And unprogrammed friends tend to be on the political left. But we really also, it's hard, but we kind of keep politics out of our religious practice, but not out of our activism. because we're acting from within, and collectively as well. So a meeting for worship, if you come into our meeting house, which would be really nice, we'd welcome you. For a long time in Santa Cruz, we didn't have a meeting house, but now we do. And you see it from the freeway. We gather in silence and wait for the Spirit. So we sit in a circle of chairs. And usually whoever enters the room first sits down and is quiet. They don't sit down and have conversation about what they did yesterday or anything like that. They start with the quiet, and more people come in, and then the door closes. And about 15 minutes later, it opens for late arrivals. And children usually don't sit in the whole meeting for worship. It's a long time, an hour. So if they're there, we don't have many children right now. They're in the children's room, and they come in maybe for the last 10 or 15 minutes, so they experience some of what, they can certainly feel what has just transpired in that hour of silence. And they're led, they're taught about Quakerism at home as well. So then we have vocal ministry, and there are times when we don't speak at all for that whole hour. But then sometimes one person will stand up and speak. And when people speak, that's one of the hardest things to learn, I think, when people become Quakers is this important enough to say? And it shouldn't be an announcement, it shouldn't be a political opinion, but it comes from the heart. And what a lot of people say, including myself, is if my heart starts beating faster and I can't make my legs not stand up, I stand up and speak. Maybe somebody else will speak to that, but there's a few moments of silence in between messages, so people can take that message in. Maybe there's only one message, and that's it. And then at the end of meeting, we hold hands in our circle, and then we do what you've done here today. We welcome the visitors. We also express joys and sorrows, so we hear about what everybody's concerned about, or celebrating. Make announcements, have hospitality. I'll tell you about the weddings and memorials. How many of you have been to a Quaker wedding or memorial? Just a few. I was in a couple because I was getting married, but they're both wonderful. They're storytelling. Usually in those Quaker weddings and memorials, there are more people in the circle who are not Quakers because they're relatives, friends, and neighbors than who are Quakers. So we explain to people what to expect, but we also expect more people to stand up and speak. And they're respecting that you speak when you move to speak. We don't usually have a roster or anything like that. But it is wonderful. And when somebody wants to get married in a meeting, we call it under the care of the meeting. They let the meeting know, the clerk of the meeting know. And they appoint a committee to meet with that couple. And it's not to tell them they can get married or they shouldn't get married or anything like that. It's to hear what they're thinking about and whether or not they feel clear and anything we can do to help them feel clear on their decision. Sometimes people decide not to get married, but usually they decide to get married. And then there's a little committee organized to help them plan the wedding. Many of our weddings are up at Quaker Center, which is up in Bed Lomond. And I was married up there 2 times. I'm going to tell you about that. Now, that wasn't even in my notes. First time I was married, David's mother was on my clearness committee, and it took place at their house where David and Margo still live. And we talked, and we got married in the meeting. And several years later, I realized that I was coming out as a lesbian, and I had 2 children, and a Quaker husband. We were both members of the meeting. So we both felt that our marriage was still under the care of the meeting, and we wanted another clearness committee, not to tell us what to do, but to help us be clear about what we were doing. And it was a wonderful experience. It was, as you could imagine, in this community, if this happened, it's kind of a shock to some people because they knew both of you as this family. But for the most part, I'd say almost 100% people accepted it. And 10 years ago, I got married to the woman that I met like 40 years ago because the Supreme Court said that we could get married, and our kids wanted us to get married. Our kids are grown now; they're in their 30s or 40s, and And the meeting appointed a committee, and the meeting was so excited because we were going to be the first gay couple getting married in the meeting. And about 100 people came, sat in the banquets. And my wife is Jewish. She's a member of the synagogue. And so we had some dancing and lots of good food at our potluck. So it felt really good. So I was going to tell you about our structure. One important thing is when we make decisions, we call it discernment. And sometimes things that are little tiny decisions take us forever to make because we're talking about all different aspects of should we do this or not? Should we take down those 2 palm trees or not? Mm-hmm. And a committee is kind of bringing that to the business meeting, which happens once a month. And in the business meeting, it's also a meeting for worship. That's how it's handled. We have silence in between if there's a lot of discussion, and then people say, I think I need a minute of silence. Then we're all quiet. We're all thinking back to what we just heard or what we just said. And hopefully we'll come to a decision that we all agree to. Sometimes they're bigger decisions. We also have something that is called concerns in leadings. A concern would be something simple, like should we keep the door closed for 15 minutes or for 10 minutes? That's a concern. Somebody might have a concern, like they don't like that or they like it. A leading is when a person gets an idea and they really want to follow it. And it could be for them personally or it could be involve the whole meeting. And I went through that process once. Years ago, when my daughter, who's now 47, was just a baby, I got the idea of starting a Quaker school. I had worked at a couple of Quaker schools in New York. And so I thought, I'm meeting, should start a Quaker school. For 2 years, we had a committee just talking about it, just talking. And we decided we weren't going to start a Quaker school. We didn't have the money or the energy it was going to take. So instead, we started a conflict resolution program that we took into the public schools. And we could reach more people that way. And it already had been done in New York, so we didn't have to invent the wheel. And I was concerned, I'm going to talk as fast as I can. I was concerned that decision would not be accepted by the meeting. And there was a man in the meeting that we all respected, who was a big political activist, who said, we don't have to do that because we know everything about conflict resolution and kids know this. And I said, but you know what? This is a religious group trying to take this program into public schools. And that could be hard. And the people in New York already figured out how to do that. And then he stepped aside. We call it standing aside. He didn't agree with it, but he wasn't going to stop it. So we had consensus. And we started that program. Years later, when I was teaching high school, I recreated it for high school students. And I got to teach it for 5 years, which was wonderful. I included everything in there, talking about racism, talking about all kinds of things. Helping kids know how to reduce conflict in their lives that they would face all their life, because we all have conflict. I think I'm going to probably end here. There's more that we could say, but I hope I gave you a good